Um, well, Alex has been with me for 4 years nearly, and he was 7.5 when he came to live with me, so kind of older child. And he's a very kind of lovable, affectionate boy, and he just needs to be loved really. But he also has some big challenges because he had a tough early start in his life, and he was very neglected when he was little. And I think he's missed out on some of the early stages in his development. So, for example, he still kind of finds it hard to believe things he can't see. So there's a lot of reassurance if I'm out of the room, and he loves playing games that younger kids play, like peekaboo or hide and seek. And I think I've kind of learnt quite quickly that, you know, you obviously want to encourage children to become independent, but actually he can't learn to be independent until he's learnt to be dependent on a reliable adult, in this case me. So actually it's important to kind of fill in the bits that he's missed out on in his life. I was 45 when I decided to adopt as a single man, and I think the reason I wanted to is I wanted to take on a parenting role with a child. When I was younger, I've always enjoyed being favourite uncle, I suppose, and I used to look after my sister's kids a lot, and they used to come to stay. But I never particularly wanted kids of my own. And when I'm divorced, but when I was married, my ex-wife and I hadn't particularly wanted to have children. But after we divorced, I had a relationship with a woman who had a young child, and I kind of fell in love with the child as well as the mum. And so I guess when that relationship didn't work out, I kind of realised that actually I could love a child who wasn't kind of biologically my own. And at that stage I think I thought, oh well, single people, and probably particularly single men, couldn't adopt. So I thought about fostering initially. And in fact the fostering social worker said when she came to see me that by the sound of it she thought I wanted a kind of more permanent nurturing relationship with the child. So she said, well, why don't you think about adoption? And I guess for men it's obviously different, but there's roughly the equivalent of I think the biological clock is not the same, but it was a kind of sense I'm getting older, and I'd like to have children in my life while I'm kind of able to give them the energy and time they need. So how did I come to find Alex? Well, initially I saw his picture in the magazine Children Who Wait, and it was kind of quite a heart-rending magazine, often seeing kids there. But I think people say now that he looks a bit like me. I mean, I haven't kind of noticed that, but maybe at some subconscious level I was drawn to him because of that. And I tried to get as much information as I could about him in terms of reports from the social worker, and I met his old teacher, and we went up to his foster carer's house. And I think that was probably the day I kind of realised that, I guess in a way I was beginning to fall in love with him, in that the reports about him, he had some quite challenging issues to deal with, and I think my social worker was worried it might be a bit too much for me to manage as a single person. But in fact, when we talked to his teacher and his foster carers, they said that he was a really courageous boy, and he was very affectionate, lovable, and he had lots to give and lots of potential to develop. And I think I kind of fell in love with the potential he had to develop. And seeing a DVD of him playing with his remote controlled car was also kind of an important moment. So I think, there comes a point when I think it's the right match for you. The memory of the first day I met him is still very vivid. I knocked on the door of his foster carer's house, and he opened the door, and we were obviously both very nervous, and he kind of shoved a remote control car in my face almost, and kind of wanted me to play with him. And that day I kind of went into the house, and I had his foster carer and social worker all trying to leave us to play kind of quietly. And I think it was important to get down on the floor and play with him and enjoy his cars. But even at that stage, he kind of was bossing me around and telling me what to do. And I kind of knew for my own self-respect it was important to set a few boundaries with him. So actually he said, oh, go and get that car for me. So I said, well, I'd love to play with you, but I think you need to bring the car to me. So I was kind of wanting him to learn at an early stage that, and part of it was to let Dad be in charge, which obviously can be quite hard for children who haven't had parents who've been in charge before. And then I can remember the social worker and the foster carer trying not to look as if they were kind of pretending not to notice how we were getting on, but actually desperate to know how we were doing together. So that was my first day of meeting him. And then the day I brought him home, we had about 10 days of introductions, getting to know him gradually, but the day I went to pick him up from my house and driving back in the car to where I live, and I remember that kind of huge sense of responsibility, thinking, oh my goodness, this is my well, obviously legally he wasn't my son at that point, but you know, this is my son, and he's moving to a place where he doesn't know anyone, and obviously that's a kind of big sense of responsibility, but also a huge sense of excitement too, feeling, you know, gosh, you know, it's a really important job I'm doing. Yeah, he started to call me Dad very quickly, which I was kind of surprised about. That was another kind of very moving. I think the first day he called me by my name, but then after that, I think I tend to talk about myself in the third person quite a bit as Dad. And I think on the second day, I think he called me Dad or Daddy for the first time. And then in general, from then in the introductory period, he picked up calling me Dad, Daddy very quickly. Helping him to come to terms with why he's adopted is a big part of my job, I think, and helping him to make sense of that, because I think older children probably particularly tend to blame themselves. You know, I think he at times thinks, well, it was, you know, something he did and it meant he wasn't good enough to live with his birth family. So obviously quite a lot of my kind of job as dad is to help him understand that that actually wasn't it, that, you know, that his mum and dad in his case did love him a lot, but they just weren't able to look after him in the way that he needed, but you have to kind of keep coming back to that. Yeah, I mean, practically the reason I adopted an older boy was partly at that stage my job. I was managing a local charity, and I had 6 months adoption leave, and I went back to work part time after I adopted Alex. So I think it was important that you know, I wanted a child that was of school age, I think, really, rather than earlier. One of the things when I was assessed as an adopter, I think my social worker particularly wanted to test me out on was what my support network was like, particularly, you know, being single. So I think that's been something that's been really important to me. And my friends and family have been very supportive, but also I think probably most valuable to me has been developing a links and networks with other adoptive parents, both single and couples. And I think actually it's not just single people that need the support. Often couples find that some of their friends and family who they thought, you know, their heart's in the right place and they thought would be supportive, but sometimes they find it hard to understand some of the issues that adoptive parents are dealing with. And often I think adoptive parents find that, you know, the children, because when they get safe with the parents, they can give them all the trauma they've had in their early lives, whereas actually they tend to be very well behaved outside the home, but having to deal with that at home can be quite isolating at times. So that can be quite tough. So having a network of reliable friends to call upon is really important. And I think Devon have been really helpful in terms of that there's a monthly support group that I go to, and then there's just been an annual conference recently. So those kind of links I think are really helpful. And then there's training events, so about how to do life story work, maybe to help your child make sense of their early life. Okay, I mean, I think two things people tend to say to me about adoption. The first is often that does kind of get you a bit wound up as an adoptive parent, is when often well-meaning friends and professionals say, oh, all children do that. I don't know, for example, if Alex has had a tantrum at school, and of course all kids do have tantrums, but when he's at an 11-year-old boy having a tantrum like a 2-year-old quite regularly, I would say first of all that's not probably that common, and also the reason for it will be often quite different for kids who've grown up in a kind of secure birth family. So for Alex, you know, he hasn't been through the development stage of having attention when he had a tantrum, so sometimes he's doing it to get attention, and the intensity and the motivation behind it can be different. So sometimes you can feel a bit isolated as an adoptive parent in that respect. And then the second thing people say quite a lot is, oh, you know, something to the effect of, oh, how wonderful you are, or, you know, aren't you being very altruistic to adopt Alex? And I think what I'd say to them is actually, you know, for me, the benefits of having Alex in my life are at least as great as any benefits I hope I can give him, and I'm not doing it to be altruistic. You know, it's been a fantastic experience for me in my life, and although it's been the biggest challenge I've, you know, ever had to face, it's also been the most rewarding. You know, so that's why I kind of value it and enjoy it and do it.